to talk about stitch markers and row counters. So stitch markers are helpful to mark between sections. So here I am making a piece where there's a section of purl stitches, section of knit stitches. And certainly I could just count, it's 5, 5, 5. I could just count every single time. But it's a lot easier for me to just have a visual cue when it's time to move to the next one, to the next section. So this first section is purl. So I'm just going to purl 5 and then show you how to move the stitch marker. All right, here's my 5th one. So now with your stitch marker, you just slip it over. So you just insert your right needle and just move it over. And now it's time for me to knit 5. Oops. Okay, here's my next one. Again, you can just slip the needle in and move it over. One tip is to not put your needles down right when you are on a stitch marker. Instead, if I had to put my work down right now, I would do it like this, where I'm not right by a stitch marker. If you do it when there's a stitch marker at the end of your needles, it's really easy for that stitch marker to fall off. Okay. So I'm going to continue like this to the end. These stitch markers are by Coco Knits. And I like them because they are, well, number one, they're just, I think they're adorable, but they're also metal, and she has a wrist. This fits on your wrist, and it's a magnet, and so it holds the stitch markers. So if I'm in a project where I have to put them on and take them off, then this fits around my wrist and can hold the stitch markers. So at the end here, I also want to talk to you about row counters, because this pattern, you do 6 rows like this, and then you flip and do the opposite way. So ultimately it makes a checkerboard like this. So this is the matching mug cozy that goes with this coaster I'm making. And so what I do is every time I get to the end of a row, I click. This also is by Coco Knits and is magnetic and fits right on, as do her cable needles and a number of other tools. So it's very handy. Back to the row counter though. I always click at the end of a row. So then if I put my work down right now and I come back, I know this is the row I'm coming back to. Other people set it so that it's the number of the row before, so they don't click it until they finish a row. So like right now, I've just finished row 6. Some people would now click it to say row 6, but I like it to always be on the row that I am knitting. It really doesn't matter as long as you are consistent. My favorite app for patterns is Knit Companion, and there's actually a digital counter right in the app along the side. You can see those little color circles at the bottom right, and those are numbers. So as I end a row or a section, I can just make a tick and it will add those up for me. So the last thing I want to share on stitch markers is that for bigger projects, this is really handy. Like if you're doing lace work, or here I'm doing some color work, and this is a 20 stitch repeat. Well, if I got all the way to the end of this, I mean, it's a sweater, and so it's a lot of stitches. It's over 300 stitches to go around the sweater. And so if I get all the way to the end of 300 stitches and realize I am off by a couple, well, that's really hard to go back and fix. Same thing if you're doing a lot of lace work. So I always put stitch markers in between the repeats. So that's my 20 section repeat. So I then know at the end of 20 stitches, if I'm not in the right place, I made a mistake right in that last 20 stitches and can go back and fix it. And then my other tip is if I'm working in the round, when I get all the way back to the round, I use a completely different kind of stitch marker. So here I have a little silver one. All of the rest of them are my color Coco Knits ones, just like this. So that's a big sign to me that I am at the end of my chart row and I need to now switch to the next step in my chart. So I use stitch markers all the time just to help make sure that I'm not making any mistakes in my pattern, and to hold my place, and to keep me from having to count like on patterns like this, so that I can be knitting while watching a movie or something else. So I hope that is helpful, and gives you some insight on how to use stitch markers and row counters.